Hey, so part two of interaction. Um, I'm just gonna continue. Uh, there's a piece of bread that can get passed along. Um, if you're in a room, let's say, and determined by an individual, because everything is based off yourself, right? And perhaps the collective group that you uh, resolve yourself in, evolve yourself in, and as well as what's indirectly proportioned to you. Uh, and not to make myself sound like I know it all, but just like just everything that's prioritized that's important to you. Whether that's religion, education, friends, family, games, sports, certain entertainment. It's tying in here or here, you know. It's gonna actually have a part of you that dictates, not dictates, but makes decision making skills and makes you more involved or less involved. But once again, back to that bread, that piece of bread. Um, if it gets passed along, some that individual may think it's a simple, plain piece of bread. Tastes plain, it looks plain, it's regular like everyone else, made of yeast and flour, and you just eat it every single time before an appetizer, before a main course meal, or it's a compliment to let the palate come about, over time, stuff like that, and it's basic. Sometimes people think it's like very simple. Um, it's what else is plain, it's like things like you don't really appreciate until you're far away from it for a long time, like water. Um, but once you're exhausted and you're thirsty, and water tastes amazing. So that's bread, but in the other light, another can taste it as a pure bite into flour. Each bite is savory. Every bite you're just like, it's amazing. You can't even reckon with it because you don't even want to talk about it 'cause it's so good sometimes. Like it's so good. Um, so with that being said, off the analogy or metaphor of bread, same could be thought of as with information. So I spoke about the invisible in the first video as one channeling situation. You could channel perhaps your prior wisdom or knowledge experience into this invisible. Um, or you can use it to illustrate the many facets that are connected with one another and how the very choice direction you choose can also provide insight into how you approach the invisible. So kind of like the convoluted thought that I processed I was going on before in the a few minutes back. Um, I think the invisible is actually something that you would be willingly and honestly looking to speak about because it's been undeterred, it's been unbroken, it's been consistent, or it's been a relay of almost institutes, a relay of a large body of um, time of where your effort goes into. And so that invisible is many of things. Like I was talking about before, it's like it could be because once you're talking about idea that's kind of invisible, um, it could directly proportion or indirectly proportion to things that you want to explain better off by paralleling. But even paralleling could go so far. It's worked for me dramatically, like back in the day when everything is going very good and smoothly, and energy's high, and you're not as pessimistic, and you're consistently making the right choices. Um, but it doesn't work so well once you understand the diversity. So that's kind of weird because it's like, well, you kind of seem open minded. You kind of seem very diverse yourself. Yeah, it goes hand in hand, but with the both and both, it's difficult because you're gonna have to make a state of issuance when you're going from talking about what what you can actually derive from then you have your thought process of like, okay, this is me. But I've been through a lot of situations where, simply put, somebody tells me to do something, and I turn around and do it. But I think that's human nature, and a lot of people consider that sin, but it's kind of life experience. It's like, you probably wouldn't break 8, 7 of the 10 commandments, but when it comes to like, respecting your parents, or you know what I mean, like there are moral codes that eventually you're gonna have to be faced with. But that's all I'm talking about. Is like, how can you maintain and then sustain the possibilities of having an endurance factor of what you hold to be true, and then, well, what you hold to be true, and then you want to actually make it look like it's progressing in a way that is um, systemically positive, in a good light, works. I think in America, if it works and it profits, it's a lot of what makes out to be successful. But I think you're just gonna have to be able to look at something, and then you go, hey, look, I know this, and I think that's also where um, the process of knowing how either successful, comfortable, mature, dedicated, resolute about what you're going through. I think that also has an application mode that you need to go through, so that you can actually strive to be more, I guess, clear. Yeah, more clear of trying to be able to come up with respects, or come up with tangible ideas from almost ex- existential kind of paradigm, because a lot of people, believe in God, but how are they going to talk about it with somebody that isn't, or that doesn't? Um, like it's almost very possible, and it's almost impossible, considering like, you know, if you could, let's just scrap it all, and just say, can you explain what love means? Um, and I think a lot of people have different opinions about that. Um, and I think a lot of people look for that perfect situation. Um, but I think, even in that sense, you're gonna have to make difficult choices, and difficult chances, and difficult perspectives, and make it all work together. But that is actually, yeah, that's kind of what I'm talking about. It's like, so as a person that is trying to speak about, things that everyone could relate to, or possibly, there's a threshold, because say you watch a video that's really popular, around like 6, 7, 8 figure views, and then you're like, all right, but I know 100,000 people out of those 1 million people actually know what's really going on as far as what's being talked about. Perhaps it's 50%. So the idea, the 10% to 50%, like that light, you're gonna have to really be able to progress forward to know that, just like the tax brackets, there's always gonna be a state of mind and a state of living that you're gonna want to, um, regardless if you want to digress, or if you want to continue to watch, or continue to interact, continue to, the basis of what I'm going off of. But if you want to continue to be there, um, regardless if it's just knowledge, wealth and knowledge, um, that's my basis, is because, we could talk about money, we could talk about all of that, what to do to make money, what is it that makes money, and how important it is to make money. Those are always confident lines that people can, single out. their lives for. Um, but that's not the direction that I'm going either. It was more than that. It was always more than that, and it's always been something that I've been fully aware of. But sometimes it's high and sometimes it's low, just based off my feeling, my motivation, um, and deep deep down inside, it's like I wish there are people that know me deep down inside, but then it's like when I wish that I already know that because there are so many people. It's because that's how I know. That's how much I know my invisibility in the visible. Uh, but that's just because I know who I am as an individual. Um, and so when I talk about these interaction values, it's because of the fact that I know exactly who I am. Um, and so these interaction values uh, can mean a lot for a person that's well versed or well acknowledged or just has that capability of being free-minded, loving, patient, willing to make change, understanding, dynamic, uh, high energy, and clear, steady-minded. Um, because when I write these things, like I might as well just say like all of these things just off the whim of the word, of the loose end of my tongue. Um, but I realize, no matter how much of a good person I am, and no matter how much of a bad person I am, these things actually never really change. And these things will never really have different values. It's just within these values that I'm talking about, it becomes ever more so rich because of the fact that um, you've been part of and you're doing it the right way. Because when you do it the right way, it's amplified by way more than you will ever imagine. But then when you do it with regulatory effort and you start kind of like half-assing certain things and you start sinning here and there, you're going to realize the downfalls. You're going to realize the pitfalls. You're going to realize the little inconsistencies that you don't need. You're going to realize the temperaments that you don't need. And you're going to realize those things make a difference. And then you're going to realize all the little things make a difference. And all the little things are really true to who they are because, God has created the world. It's not because, you're being hacked technologically multiple different ways. It's just, it's on another value of which your soul and mind can appreciate. But I like to talk about this because I go on and I go on and I go on and I find that peace. I find that peace that's warranted. I should realize that because when you're a person, you want to think of things that you can bookmark almost to think that you can deliver some sort of proponent that you would be in receivable mode or giving mode because you can't always be either like I remember for the longest time I stay silent about a lot of things that I want to talk about directly, and that's a really good thing too. But it takes a discouraging uh, path in the long run afterwards. I mean, during the momentum is quite amazing. So you're hoping that you can actually remember all these values and facts and things. You can remember all of these and you can hold it. And I also realized if it come back to me, later down the line, that makes it even better. Which is right now because a lot of things I feel like have come back to me in a proper way and also in a fun way and a crazy way and in like a what the heck. But if there are things that I could, talk about, I'd much rather talk about it freehand as opposed to, all presentation heavy, wanting to make you feel good, wanting to make you understand exactly where I'm coming from, because I feel like you know exactly where everyone's coming from all the time. Because I think one thing that we're all kind of, difficult in difficult times with is we can start to tend to look to people in a manner that's way more than they ought to be. When in reality, they may be going through the same thing that you're going through. And so, I'm just thinking of it that way. But to continue in the tread of, like I spoke about the invisible in the first video. You know, and how can I keep on talking about this approach, or I guess I am, that there's an approach that you can have um, when an individual is talking about the invisible, and you're there, and you're like, how can I like understand what that means? It goes back to like having the approach as one of a boxer, um, that can really really can just like answer his Goku thing, where you can fight, you can almost like spar with ideas that a person is coming up with that some people may never get, some people may never understand their entire life. Um, and so a good boxer is being able to like, but it's not boxing with nothing, because a lot of people, they're gonna tend to realize how honest people are. They're gonna start faking things out, countering and stuff like that. But it's just more so what I mean by boxing. I'm not alluding to actually fighting, but I'm alluding to the fact that you can be consistent, like a tennis player going back and forth. Um, Ping pong. It's just that the idea where if you're a boxer, you're trying to take him out, like iron sharpens iron, but you're trying to take him out because he's your opponent. Um, so there are going to be things that you'd much rather want to look for when he talks or she talks about this, and all of a sudden you're like, well, how you present this idea in your head, and you're like that. This could all be just talking to yourself. But what I mean by boxer is like you gotta be continually active, and then you'll realize in this invisible, you can really just understand what these people are trying to relay. And that's probably one of the most difficult things. Or you could approach it like you're the person's best friend. So, you know, I just like the defining of what love is. I think a best friend can do a lot of things. Listen, know exactly what you're talking about, shoot your BS down, um, have better ideas, um, have similarities that you can talk about, have stories you can talk about, or have talk about um, opportune moments, that you guys kind of didn't have or whatnot. Best friend stuff. Click clack, or that invisible. You could have the approach that you got to be the wisest counselor. You gotta be somebody that one's really hard. Like you I would say that one, being a counselor, in the approach of a counselor is like, how do you know how to establish all those balances? How do you know where that fruition comes from? Um, do you know better in the field that they're even talking about, that they're so expertised in? Is your word even a match? Uh, because you don't even have experience in that, haven't you? Or are you taking on a mold that represents a fresh perspective that becomes embodied because it's simply to be true? Because truth, like, if it's bottlenecked, it's a sad sight. But if it's exponential, woo, you might as well have a whole bunch of people being able to talk. But that's a whole other thing. Opinions of a whole bunch is kind of difficult to talk about too. But or that person could be a fortune teller, a prophet. Not so it's like it's like if you ever know what's gonna happen when people are talking, you can kind of decipher, understand, and kind of eventually lead into mastermind a thought process. Those things all happen, I think, when people are watching other people, or watching other actions taking place, animals, nature, whatever is going on. I think all those things take place. But my whole situation is like, it is really cool when you can highlight that invisible as proper knowledge and then make it into something that's yours and then bring out something that you got. It doesn't have to be anywhere. It can be through social media. It can be through work. It can be through whatever, but it works. I know that for a fact. But I think there are certain key-ins that all of those people would have as far as approach goes. When you have that invisible, and then you're like, okay, perhaps your overseer, perhaps your best friend, perhaps your counselor, perhaps you're a boxer. I don't know, like Goku Jiren, or or something Goku, or what's the new character? Tomorrow. Yeah, but I think that's almost taken done care of and stuff like that. But yeah. So I think that's pretty much what I meant. As far as like what I can baseline off of. I do still wish I could be a little bit more precise, but that takes time. But the invisible is what is a reaction based off a reaction? Who knows? But what also is something that you have here, and here, and then once you look at all the things that you've been through, and then go, okay, you can use that as like your base play almost. Like, I'm not gonna get too abstract. I'm probably in this video soon, but it's like almost, if you want to go childhood, and if I go back to like all the properties that I was talking about, maybe like 2 years ago, year ago, it's like you even have like Pokemon. You have these pocket monsters, and you have these individuals that you can know what I'm talking about. You know exactly what I'm talking about if you got me so far. So that's pretty much it. I ended off with that. Peace.